Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Nate continuation of Life Before ABC in 123 during the residential school traumatism. I left off at the part of my traumatism from going to residential school. Well, this is what happened after refused to go back to residential school. And when all the academic of alcoholism took over our elders, our ancestors that didn't speak English and passed away without teaching the younger generation the language of where they come from or their culture or their clan songs and stuff like that. When they baptized me in the smokehouse, Elicho, Veronique, Marianne, Betsy, and the rest of her sisters that all passed away, gave me the spirit and the power that I needed to survive because I guess they knew that sooner or later they were going to take me away. During that academic, my older sister Alice, Mary Alice, went to residential school, like I said, and Stephen Patrick went to residential school. And a spiritual advisor told me that it was going to take at least 2 life terms to get healed for residential school survivors. I'm the last of my family out of three brothers and three sisters. I'm the seventh child and was never supposed to be born after my twin sister Ida and Irene were born. My mother was not able to have any more children. And yet I was born in 1956. So after that, my grandmother and my auntie Francisca Antoine told one of my nephews that I was a miracle child that was never supposed to be born. When they baptized me, I forgot all about it. But when I started getting into alcohol because of what happened to me in residential school, to try and drown my sorrows and my hurt and my deep traumatism that I didn't know anything about. I went only far as grade 5 in my life in school. I never had any education after that. Everything I learned was just hands on. I worked as a carpenter helper all my life, a roofer, and I was always never smart enough to continue my education. I went through apprentices in carpentry and roofing and stuff like that, but every time they asked for my diploma, I had nothing to give them except a grade 5 report card. Hands-on hands-on working as a carpenter, I was a good carpenter. I had good math skills and stuff like that, the measurements and all that. I was taught by a couple of Chinese people in Vancouver for 8 years, and they said there was goodness inside me. They see, but at the same time, I was not in a good environment, and I grew up with a lot of criminals and gangsters. And when I had a shootout with the RCMP in 1972 for refusing to go back to a residential school, they gave me 4 years. And I went to the place called Henny Correctional Center that was run by four gangs in the whole institution. And all they did was taught me how to survive with my hands. They taught me how to hurt other people, and they taught me how to control other people and how to survive inside the institutions. They kept telling me to forget about my family outside in society because inside was your family, and that's where you had to live. You had to live by the inmates' rules, not by the guards' rules. You go by what they tell you and what you can do and what you can't do. And they'll teach you skills of how to protect yourself with your hands and your feet. But they never taught you anything about with your mind, but they fill your heart full of anger and hatred and stuff like that. It took me years after that when I got out of prison before I even knew anything about traumatism. And when my last daughter was born in 1987, I decided to quit liquor. I stopped drinking. And then I promised myself I would never show my daughter that things that my parents went through when they were drinking. While they were drinking, it was really hurt me. It got a lump in my throat that never went away for years. And every time I see another person's parents drunk in town, that lump would always come back. And it really hurt me because I was too small to protect them and too small to bring them home. And alcohol was killing them right in front of me. I couldn't help them whatsoever. My grandmother, they said, passed away from heartbroken because when I went to prison, it really broke her heart and she just sat down and died, I guess. After that, all her sisters passed away. By the time I got home, all my family was dead. They were all gone from liquor, from violence. My oldest brother was murdered, stabbed 3 times in his own house. In his own house, my twin sister Irene was punched in the throat in a bar called the Zoo, by a bartender in there, and she died 3 days later with crushed vocal cords. And then her twin sister Ida was found in Dodson Hotel, died of hemorrhage of cirrhosis. Her liver exploded from drinking liquor. And my oldest brother Stephen, he never ever recovered from his traumatism from residential school. He was always by himself, just the way I was, and he didn't like people, didn't want to be around people, and he died of massive heart attack. And my last brother, who passed away, was the one that wrestled me down when I had a shootout with RCMP, and he also died of a heart attack. My whole life was just nothing but violence. I never knew any love whatsoever in my life until my last daughter, uh, Carmen Wanda Johnson, married me as my wife, and we had a daughter named Carmen Jessica Johnson. They started saying they loved me and stuff like that, but I couldn't understand that word love because I never raised with love. I was raised with very lot of violent people through all the years in traumatism of being incarcerated. I was sentenced to any correctional center in '72. By the time I got out of there, I was full of hatred, anger, violence. All I knew how to do was fight and hurt people. I got out of there in '77. By then, I was almost 22 years old, going on 25. It wasn't too long. I was out 6 months. I was so institutionalized. All the people I knew was inside the institution were my family. I had no more family out here because all they did was drank their lives away, and I didn't want to be around anymore of that. So I got into liquor again in 1977. It got so bad to the point where I ended up taking a life of a bootlegger there. And when I went to jail, my Ida and Irene and 3 others admitted killing this person and included me. So I was charged for first degree murder in 1977, and I was inside the old institution at Prince George Regional Correctional Center, and that's where I was introduced to a guard. Two Christian guards came to my cell and prayed over my head, and that's when I accepted the Lord into my heart. And when Jesus came into my heart at that time, it was like my grandmother having her baptism over me in a smokehouse. It's like something came over me, and they said, "You're going to get out of here." And I said, "How can I get out of here when I'm charged for first degree murder?" Sure enough, 7 months later, there was no hardly any evidence, so they put a stay of proceedings on my charge of first degree murder, and I was released into society. After that, I was so traumatized I didn't want to go back to prison because I was facing a life sentence. I started working in the bush camps, and then 4 years later, in 1981, I was recharged for the same murder, or first degree murder, on the same murder charge. I went back to prison, and the two guards that baptized me told me that the only way you're going to get out of it is just go to court and tell the truth. So I went to court. I pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 5 years more in prison. And I lost all my family after that because I went to the maximum security in prison at Kent Institution. That was the most cold-heartedest place I ever went into, besides the Ocala prison. When I went in there for 5 years, once that gate closed behind you, your whole spine turned cold, your heart turned cold. There was nothing but coldness and into your heart. You cannot feel anything else worse than everything in. And then when I got inside the institution, I was already introduced to the lifers group. I met a few real good people that were in the lifers group, took me under their wing, and they said there was some kind of goodness in my heart that they saw, but other people couldn't see. I couldn't see it myself. So that's where they saw that I was writing letters home by cutting names out of words out of the newspaper, sticking it on a paper, and sending it back home. That's the only education I had. So they started bringing me to the library and started teaching me how to read and write and stuff like that. But no sooner than I started doing that, they were transferred me to another prison called Matsqui Penitentiary. And that's where I went to RPC, Regional Psychiatric Treatment, for 6 months. They put wires on my head and stuff like that, and they tried to figure out why all the violence were coming out of me when they realized that I was such a nice person. And then some of the guards in there, they said shouldn't be incarcerated. I should be out there in society, working and helping my family. At the time, I didn't have any family by then. So a few of them got together, wrote good reports to me, and then we had to convince 5 national parole officers that I was capable of living in a minimum security, and I shouldn't be in a maximum security prison because all I was doing was learning how to learn devious stuff that I shouldn't have put in my head. And then after that, I was transferred to Mission Institution, a minimum security prison. And that's where they put me on this program for called 5 M2 program, man-to-man program. They started making me go out into society, giving out resumes and stuff like that, and trying to get a job. And they said that my counselor at the time told me if I can get a halfway house to be put into, then I got a good chance of getting the parole officers to release me. By then, it was in 19. By then, it was almost time. I was getting pretty old by then, but I ended up going to Activators in 1984, I think, and that's where I met my wife Wanda, and we got together, and that's when my daughter was born in 1987. 86, we got married. Well, I got transferred back out of Prince George because I started drinking again and trying to kill the hurt and the traumatism I went through. And I was getting really bad nightmares, which I'm still doing today, of prison life, killing, fighting with knives. I lived through 3 raids, 2 raids in A&E Correctional Center when I was young. All of them things really started getting to me. And the worst thing during the residential school was that at night you hear them kids crying for their mother. That kept sticking with me. And all the times I was in prison, I kept thinking that there were them kids that were inside residential school crying for their mom. At night time, they go to bed and they start crying, "Mom, Mom." And Lord willing, I think their mothers and their parents heard them, but they were too drunk to realize that they were too far gone. They were dying of alcohol, all their parents, and I hate to tell them that, but I didn't tell them that, and I just moved on. And then when I got out of transferred from mission to halfway house and activators in Prince George, and when I got to Burnaby, me and my wife, my daughter was just born at the time. That's when I started working as a carpenter with a couple of Chinese people. It was very hard for me not to touch drugs or alcohol and stuff like that, yet I still got into marijuana. That really helped me big time because I couldn't live with what I was going through. My wife, she took a lot of mental abuse from me by yelling at her and things like that. And here it was not me yelling at her, it was all the traumatism I was going through. She kept saying there's good stuff in you, but you just have to get it out of you somehow. And then she suggested for me to see doctors. So I started seeing these doctors, and all they would do is give me pills for sleeping, pills for not for my anger. Next thing I know, I was popping pills like crazy. I was popping Xanax, Secanols, Fearnols, Tylenol 3s, 222s, wake up pills, go to sleep pills. And I realized that this stuff was killing me more quicker than alcohol. So we ended up moving back to Prince George, and I still refused to drink. And I started telling my friends, no, I don't drink no more. And that came as a different story too. All my friends were started telling me, oh, now you're too good for us. You don't drink no more. You think you're better than us. And my family and my friends, they all started turning against me because I didn't want to drink with them anymore. But they didn't realize how fucked up I was on drugs and pills and all of that. But that was trying to keep my shit together inside, and I was ready to blow up. And but I refused all that, and that lump in my throat just kept getting bigger and bigger. And I kept yelling and started getting really bad temper, screaming and yelling at my wife and my daughter. And finally, my wife said, "Look, we gotta separate." She kicked me out of the house and said, "Look, you have to go away because I don't want you around me and my daughter anymore." So we separated. I moved back to Vancouver by myself at that time. And then I kept working as a carpenter with my friends. But I didn't drink. I didn't want to drink. I had to support my wife and my daughter. It was very hard for me because I was not educated. I didn't know how to get around. I didn't know how to write resumes. And yet, so I stuck with these Chinese guys because they helped me. Because I kept reading the applications and stuff, my parole conditions for me and things like that. And then one day my wife phoned me and she told me to go back to Prince George and she wanted to talk to me. So I did go back to Prince George, and that's when she told me that she had cancer and she didn't want me to watch her suffer. That's why she asked me to leave, and she didn't want to watch me suffer from my nightmares and my hatred and my anger and stuff like that, and she wanted me to do something about it. Because one day she said, "You're going to get a heart attack just from the anger you got inside you." But she didn't want to watch me live with anger in my heart because at that time I was such a very dangerous person to myself, not to the public, but the public were very afraid to. I put so much fear into people out there in society. Just by them looking at me, they knew that I was not a very good person because my heart was full of anger. And then after that, I left my wife, and then she was transferred to Kelowna, BC. She had a choice to go for cancer treatment in Kelowna or Vancouver. There were the only two places that would treat her. So she raised my daughter and my grandson, Kevin, in Kelowna, but I kept sending financial help to them. But I could not live with her or any of the kid or the grandson because of my anger. She didn't want me to show them the anger I had inside me yet. I would visit 1 or 2 days. That's it. I couldn't stay no longer. Then I started getting frustrated. It felt like I was trapped again. I can't get out of that trappedness. So I've been a loner all my life, right from when my grandma and all them passed away, and right when they sent me to residential school. Even today, I can't even live with myself sometimes. I get bad nightmares from residential school, from prison, from all of my back life. I had no life whatsoever. And then finally, I got introduced to my doctor was retiring in Fort St. James. He said, I know you don't want to take any drugs or pills or anything like that, but I'm going to introduce you to this doctor. I didn't know who this doctor was. He said he was a specialist. So I said, okay, let's give her a try. Then she said, I'm going to introduce you to this advocate. Her name is Jessica Hoggs in Fort St. James Health Department. And I told him I didn't want to have anything to do with my bad health or anything like that. I didn't want for them to know anything about what I was going through. So Jessica Hoggs got an appointment with me for a specialist. Him, Mr. Minhas, he was a psychiatrist. And I have a counselor there too in Fort St. James that I started seeing. When me and my navigator and my counselor started talking, they said, you have to talk to the psychiatrist. When we talked in the meeting in a room there, they were both crying and said that I was so traumatized I was on the verge of suicide. I didn't know anything about what the hell they were talking about. So, anyways, I had a meeting with Minhas on a Zoom camera, and he didn't even talk to me 20 minutes, and he classified as me as PTSD on the verge of suicide, which he was not wrong. I was ready to commit suicide because I didn't want to live with this anger, the dreams, and I didn't want to bring that on upon my wife or my daughter or my grandson. I thought I'd just get in it, and that way I won't have any more anger or bad dreams and stuff like that. So in 19, when I turned 65, I got a pension, and then when I got my pension, seniors sent me a letter stating that if I go back to school, they would pay for my diploma. So I saw this ad in the paper, and my daughter Carmen told me, Dad, he said, look at there's a carving course, an art course that's in Terrace that are offering for 2 years. Maybe you should go there and help you with your anger and your emotional stuff. So I applied for it, and they asked for my another diploma. And then I told my daughter, I said, tell them that the seniors are going to be paying for my diploma, that they shouldn't worry about it. And my daughter said that no, they want your high school diploma. And I said, oh, fuck. I said, I haven't been to school, my daughter. I said, how can I send them that? And she applied for my report card from St. Mary Grady Residential School, and they sent us to Prince George, Prince George College. So we went there, and then I had to fill out an application to get my report card, my education report card. I paid the $18, and they said, come back in a few weeks. We'll let you know when we got it. A few weeks later, they contact us, and they gave me my daughter. I got this report envelope from them, and I gave it to my daughter. I said, look at here, see what they say. And then she opened it, and she looked at me. She started crying. I told her, what's the matter, my girl? Why are you crying? She says, Dad, you only went to grade 5 all your life? I said, I never had told you. I said, I haven't never been back to school ever since 1969. I ran away from residential school. I escaped from the prisons. I ran away from Brannan Lake School, where they sentenced me to for 1 year for not complying with residential school, for not complying to residential school rules and stuff like that. So I spent a year in Brannan Lake School. And that's where I was introduced to three gangs. There was a Clark Park gang, Renfrew Park gang, and Port Coquitlam gang. And that's where I was baptized also. To become one of them, I had to get a cross that was tattooed on my wrist here. And they said that's going to be your tag to go into any prison in Canada. You get them three strikes on that cross, then you get that's for juvenile and federal prison and provincial prison. That's when you get. That's a ticket you get when you get into prison. The first thing they do is look at that, and once they see that, they know you're solid. You get first treatments of everything in there. So that's how I survived with all the criminals in there, especially the lifers. They were so intelligent people. They had IQs over 100, them guys, and that's the guys that started teaching me about education and all this. And they said I should work my way out and try and do good while I'm out in society. Anyways, after I got that report card for grade 5, my daughter and I went for coffee and went home. And my grandson said, Grandpa, why don't you go back to school? You're on pension now. Because we're growing up and we can look after ourselves now. And I said, Jesus, I said to my grandson, I'm going to be over 100 goddamn years old when I graduate. And then he laughed at me. Grandpa, they don't do that no more. They got schools for people like you. That's why they write you a letter. So at the time, I was picking cans on the highway because I couldn't get any jobs whatsoever. I couldn't get a job anywhere because of my criminal background. Every time you look for a job now, you have to show your criminal record. So I don't have a chance in hell to get any kind of job, even mopping hallways. And I was picking cans, and then one day, my nephew that was taken away when he was 3 years old, named Jackson, he said he wanted to try and help our people to get better from all the traumatism, the liquor, what's happening today. I never got mad at him. I just told him, why did you have to come back to this place? I said, there's nothing here. You had a good education, good people, you got a good head start in your life. You should stick with that. Don't come back here, I said, because all there is violence, murder, sexual rape, all this. People are turning to drugs. They're selling their mothers, their grandmothers for drugs. And it's all fucked up because of the crack and all the academic of drugs today. Anyways, besides that, I did go back to school. I went back to CNC in Prince George. I registered there. And I started in January 2022. I was no sooner there, I think it was January 13th, and they kicked me off the campus and they told me that I couldn't. I can go to school there, but I can't stay there because of my background. Because the people there, they feel threatened because I was in a very bad situation that time. I was trying to clean my act up. So I left there. I didn't stop there. I went back to Fort St. James. And I completed my grade 12 in math and my grade 11 in English after 54 years. Voluntarily going back to school, I graduated there. And then in September, I was enrolled to try and get my science and get my full diploma in grade 12. But before I ended up going back in 2023, I think in September, the Fine Arts Terrace sent me an application again stating that they'll accept me into fine arts in Terrace, British Columbia. I took all that application and I brought it to my navigator, Jessica Hawks, and asked her to help me fill it out. So with her education and all that, they talked with the Terrace, British Columbia and all this here. And then they accepted me. They said to show up there September 5th in 2023. So I ended up in Terrace, homeless, broke. All I had was a pocket full of dreams and a heart full of love and homeless in a Watermark parking lot. So my daughter Googled homeless shelter. She said, Dad, there's a homeless shelter right around the corner where you're staying. So I was living in my van, and then so I went to this homeless place, and I spent the night there. I had a good shower. Next day, I went to Coast Mountain College and registered September 5th, 2023. They asked me where my home address was. I didn't want to tell them I was from Fort St. James because all they would get was bad reports. So I told them I was on homeless. I'm living at a homeless shelter. And they said they couldn't accept it because, and I said, well, mark my van license plate number down and mark it as my home. And then so they did that, and I was accepted into the fine arts. That night I went by that old bridge in Terrace, and I made camp there, and I was just about ready to go to sleep. It was at 7 o'clock at night, and then all of a sudden my phone rang, and then I couldn't figure out who this phone number was, and so I answered it anyways. And they said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm going to sleep here. I found a good spot to camp out for the night," and they told me not to. Well, it was a fine arts staff. The principal and her mum got me a room in Sandman Inn for 2 nights. So that's where I ended up showering. I washed off all the dirt from me. Holy smokes, even that sink plugged up. So I went to school the next day and the day after, and then they got me a dorm. I was in with four different other students, foreign students from other countries. Because I was an elder and a residential school survivor, they stuck me into my own dorm because I couldn't live with people. So ever since then, I've been in the dorm. I graduated my first year in fine arts in April this year, and then the only person that was there for me was my nephew Jackson that came and saw me graduate. And there's only me and him left in our family on his mother's side. I'm the only one he's got for his uncle. The rest of the people, I guess, they don't have no use for people like us for some odd reason. Maybe it's because we don't drink or do drugs anymore. I don't know, but we can't fit into their category. So me and him been sticking together. We've been talking together. We laugh, we cry, we do dance. And right now, that's why I'm telling you this story. It's because I'm getting old. I don't know how long I'm gonna last. Sometimes I I don't even know how it's gonna last a day. But so I started bike riding and started doing hiking, and I go to groups that don't drink or do drugs, and like I go to church every Sunday, and then I pray for the ones that left before me that didn't speak English, and hopefully they're looking down at me and I show them that I'm doing good. The Natum was the one I was raised with, the name my grandma gave me until they took me to residential school and they turned it all around. But lately I got my name back, the Natum Donald Patrick. Donald is Donald Cho. My grandmother Ellie Cho is husband. And Patrick is my dad's dad, Casimir Patrick. And Cecile Sagalan is my grandmother and that's my dad's parents, Cecile Sagalan and Casimir Patrick. And my mother's parents are Donald Cho and Ellie Cho. And Jackson is my nephew through my late sister Ida, is his mother. And Ellie Cho is his grandmother. And Annie Johnny is his great great grandmother. I started showing him the pictures that I had for that, and I'm trying to catch him up to date because he wants to know he's part of the family on my side. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you wish the best. And I'm going through treatment. I went through transformation, and I do talk shows on Toastmasters, and I'm doing these podcasts with my nephew, so we can try and help our people because it's never too late to go back to school. Because it doesn't matter how old you are, you can. There's always ways that you can go back to school and get your education. Even if you don't speak English and speak your own language, don't be afraid of it. Take a step forward to your education, and then I think that it can we can overcome all the drug activity if you get the right people in the chief and council area. Because right now it's the chief and council's kids that are selling drugs to other kids that are trust fund babies, and even on my reservation, they know damn well who I'm talking about. That is a counselor, and his brother is the one that distributes drugs to the reserve. And I don't know why the chief and council they don't do nothing about it. And I think they could, but I think they're getting bullied or they're scared or stuff like that. But if I was ever to be voted into as chief, me, I would change all the rules and the laws to get rid of those people that are killing our First Nations people. You can overcome them somehow by the law and stuff like that, and you can change it because I met people in Manitoba that did that, that became a chief and got all these outsiders off the reservation for selling drugs to our younger generation there. Everybody on our reserve on Nakasli Hoten reservation are not the ones from Nakasli selling drugs to our people. It's the ones that's from other villages like Tachi and Pinche and stuff like that. They're all from there selling drugs on our reserve. And if we can get them off the reservation, we can clean up our reservation. Because Nakasli was once a very, very nice, unique place for people to come and relax. It was a peaceful place. Everybody never had their doors locked on Nakasli. And all these other people that go there and start dealing drugs and alcohol and things like that. I'm not talking against our people. I'm talking against the people that are on our reserve that are from other reservations. What we need there is somebody that'll stand up to them, get rid of them. And right now, I think the best chance you got is if you could just vote me in as a chief. I can organize things there and change things there and make it become Nakasli with 10 reservation. And it'll go back all the way to Keohachet, where we were well organized and there we help one another. And then we never give liquor or drugs to our neighbors, our people. We all stuck together. And when bad things like this happen, they used to get together and chase out whoever was doing all the bad stuff there, like the bootlicking and being drunk. If you're drunk in white society there, they would tell you, you're bringing shame to our people, not just you. Now you look at the reservation on all the First Nations, on all the cities are homeless, and yet they have real beautiful country to go back to live like civilized human beings like we used to be. Them days we had no running water, no hydro. Them were the good days. We never had no sickness or disease or people selling drugs to our younger kids or forcing our kids to go out there and sell drugs and stuff like that. We have to get back to our old ways where we elders are the ones that run our reservation, not the younger generation. Right now, if you look around yourselves, all the younger ones are dying quicker than the older ones. And if you were all organized and you lived on moose meat and grew your own gardens and things like that, would be all self-sufficient, would be healthy people, nice people, would be respectable people like we used to be back in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s. When my grandmother was alive, she never used to worry about hydro or being sick or stuff like that. She always had homemade medicine ready for anybody that came and had any kind of cold sick, any kind of fever, any kind of disease, anything like that. She was all ready for that. And I think we can go back to them days if we get the right people in the driver's seats of the chief and council. Right now, all they do is think about their pockets filled up with money instead of their people. They don't care about their people. Because if they cared about their people, they would be doing something about it to save their whole nation and getting their culture back, their language back. Everything that they took away from us from residential school, forbidden us from speaking our own language. We can get that back. There's not very many of us left that speak a fluent Korean. And now, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to sing a song. I'd like to sing you this song my grandma sang to me when she was alive, all the time when she was drinking her home brew and stuff like that in the house when we had no hydro. She was afraid that she was going to get arrested because at that time she didn't know that they made it legal for the Indians to drink in public place. And yet she always drank in the darkness, in the candlelight and stuff like that. She used to tell me to turn down the coil oil lamp and turn off the candles so she can have a swig of her home brew. And this is what she used to sing me when I used to have my head on her lap and she used to tap her cane like that. And she sing like this, Lucille, you in the lily chobechan, yo homebrew na tatsiste, sucho kazyone tislai. Kazyonedithlaiwe Yonasanitlen Kilesnichai Antenso Huishade Antendit drink down as Jani when it's Chohindende Dogan Hukatena don't leave. Ukatenatintlide Yoti Tsanona Kenyataste. Ladies and gentlemen, while I was incarcerated, I didn't know what she was singing because it was all in Dakar language. And then I translated it while I was locked up in isolation when my dad died. Before my dad died in 73, I fell asleep in isolation, and then my spirit left my body. And just like I was looking down from the sky in a graveyard in Nakasli, and I saw them packing my dad up the hill with a coffin. And then I woke up and I was in isolation. I tried. That's the first time my spirit ever left my body, and I started crying. And a few days later, they told me my dad died from broken leg and his marrow got infected and died. Well, the song that Elicho sang to me, I translated in English, and this is what it sounds like in English. I'm going to do the best I could sing it. Lucille, you, this is the song Elicho used to sing. When she take a drink of her home brew, she take a big swig of it. While she's taking a big swig of that home brew, she looked down at me and said, Grandchild, if I die before you, please don't touch this drink. And if you start doing crazy things, pray to the God above. If you pray to the God above, He will put you on the straight and narrow road. Well, that's the best I could do for you folks. And I hope you really enjoyed this podcast and it helped you all out. And take a good look at it because this is Dene. I'm speaking to you, and I hope that I hope I live more to do more talking to you and share more to you, and, especially you younger generation. It doesn't matter what you do or what you say to other people. There's always forgiveness, but please do get your education because once you get your education, that nobody can ever take from you. And turn your life to a better life in life. You don't have to sell drugs to your friends or to be one of them. Go with people that don't do drugs and things like that, and start turning your life in that direction. And you will become feeling better as you go along, and because that's what me and Jackson do. We team up together because we don't do drugs, we don't smoke drugs, and we keep trying to talk about how we can help our people because it's such a disaster now to see all these homeless native people that belong to really good reservations and that they could do good in their own reservations if they could just come overcome their drug addiction. They don't want to go to no treatment and stuff like that, yet they're willing to live in the woods, in the dungeons, in the trees, in the homeless where they have their own homeless. Well, that's the way they were raised, and that's the way they were there. But it's a traumatism that they don't know how to go about having help their sorrows and heal. Me, it took me years to get to where I am, and I'm still going through treatments and stuff like that. But this last treatment I went through, transformation, it really helped me out, and I wanted to do this podcast for my nephew because right now I feel really good for myself, and I feel healthy, and I think we're going to go a long ways, me and him, and hopefully he gets to know me before really good before I go on to the spiritual world. And for all of you guys that were in transformation T66, I wish you all the best because listen to your stories and listen to my stories. We cried, we laughed, we danced, but we all left it there, and I still got my arrow, and there ain't no fucking wagon to burn. So believe me, I tell you, stick with what your heart says, and it's a choice you make in life that's going to help you. And your choices, it should be the good choice, not a bad one. So I wish you all the best until next time. Thank you very much. Suet Jackson.